Welcome to today's video, where we'll dive into the dark and twisted story of Winter, a cunning survivor trapped in Duskmorn, and his fateful pact with the demon Valgavoth. This story is filled with betrayal, desperate choices, and the high cost of survival in one of Magic the Gathering's most mysterious and dangerous settings. We'll explore how Winter's decisions led him to sacrifice others in pursuit of freedom, only to face a grim and uncertain fate. Stick around to uncover the full tale, including the key players like Nico, the Wanderer, and the haunting entity Valgavoth. The wind whispered through the dim corridors of Duskmorn, brushing against the lone figure who called this haunting place home. Winter, a human survivor hailing from an unnamed plane, moved with a quiet confidence born of necessity. His tall frame cut a striking silhouette, his spiky black hair jutting out in wild defiance, a reminder of the chaos he had endured. His jacket vest, an eclectic patchwork of salvaged materials, some pieces oddly reminiscent of faded wallpaper, hung loosely around his lean figure. The mismatched garment told its own story of resourcefulness, a blend of scrappy practicality and relentless determination. Winter's narrow, pale face bore the marks of hardship, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow with practiced vigilance. There was no room for magic in Winter's world. Instead, he relied on the precision of his slingshot, each shot a calculated move in the constant game of survival. Every step he took through the house was deliberate, every glance measured, as he maneuvered through the ever-shifting dangers that lurked in Duskmorn's depths. Cunning and resourceful, Winter had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, adapting to his environment with a ruthless pragmatism. He wasn't just surviving, he was enduring at any cost, driven by an unyielding will to outlast the darkness. For more than a decade, Winter had outwitted the malevolent whims of the house. His survival owed not to brute strength or supernatural gifts, but to sheer intellect. Bitter and jaded, he had long since abandoned illusions of trust or camaraderie. His sharp cynicism was both a shield and a weapon, cutting through the false hopes of others and protecting his fragile edge in a world where survival was a zero-sum game. Winter's life revolved around one unshakable rule: his survival came first. If that meant throwing another unfortunate soul into harm's way, so be it. He didn't relish these decisions, but neither did he regret them. Pragmatism had become his moral compass, and his hard-won knowledge of the house's shifting terrors was his most valuable currency. He'd share what he knew, but only for a price, and only if the exchange tipped firmly in his favor. To Winter, loyalty was nothing more than a transaction, and alliances were fleeting arrangements dictated by necessity. This ruthless approach had earned him more than a few enemies among other survivors, many of whom had cast him out of their groups when his self-serving tendencies became too obvious. Alone again, Winter had accepted his fate with a sardonic smirk and a biting quip, keeping potential allies at arm's length with his dry humor. Behind the wit and the cunning lay a man who understood the house better than most, but who had also learned, painfully, that survival often meant standing alone in the darkness. Over a decade before 4564 AR, Winter had stepped through one of Duskmorn's fateful doors, a curious teenager eager to explore what lay beyond. He hadn't come alone. His best friend had been by his side, a steadfast companion through the trials of youth. But Duskmorn was no ordinary place, and the horrors within its walls soon revealed just how far Winter was willing to go to survive. When the demon Valgavoth appeared, its offer was cruelly simple: freedom in exchange for 4 lives. Desperation gnawed at Winter, his mind racing for a way out. But when no other options surfaced, he made the unthinkable choice. He offered the life of his best friend, the one person he loved most, to seal the deal. That decision, born of fear and necessity, marked the end of whatever innocence had remained in him. Whatever hope or warmth once lived in his soul was snuffed out like a dying ember. His glimmer, the spark of humanity that clings to ideals of love and loyalty, was lost in that moment, leaving behind only the bitter, hollow shell of a survivor. Now, Winter walks the halls of Duskmorn alone, his past weighing on him like a shadow. The betrayal that saved his life also defined it, shaping him into the man he is today, hardened, cynical, and unwilling to let anything or anyone hold him back again. around 4564 AR, when Nico of Miletus and the Wanderer, two former planeswalkers trapped by the malevolence of Duskmorn, found themselves cornered by danger, it was Winter who intervened. The pair had barely begun to grasp the horrors of their new prison when a Razorkin, one of the house's most fearsome predators, emerged from the shadows. Once survivors themselves, the Razorkin had long since succumbed to the house's cruelty, now hunting others for twisted amusement. Winter appeared from nowhere, his movements as silent as a whisper. With a sharp gesture, he signaled for Nico and the Wanderer to stay silent. Gripping his trusty slingshot, he aimed a precise shot that ricocheted into the distance, drawing the creature's attention away from its prey. The Razorkin prowled toward the distraction, only to snap violently into a waiting bear trap, its thrashing echoing through the halls of the house. Once the immediate danger had passed, Winter emerged fully from the shadows, his face an unreadable mask of practiced calm. Without a word, he motioned for Nico and the Wanderer to follow him, leading them through the labyrinthine corridors to a warmer, less hostile parlor. As they gathered by the dim light of a flickering lamp, Winter finally spoke. His voice was matter-of-fact, almost detached as he introduced himself. "This is the house," he explained, his sharp eyes meeting theirs. "It's the only world that matters now." He outlined the house's shifting dangers, speaking of its relentless traps and the twisted nature of its inhabitants. His tone carried no comfort, only the cold truth of a man who had learned to endure the house's horrors for years. For Nico and the Wanderer, this was their first encounter with Winter, a man whose survival instincts and bitter pragmatism were as much a part of him as the air he breathed. Winter moved across the small, dimly lit parlor with a deliberate, rolling gait, his steps unnervingly precise. He avoided the moth motifs woven into the faded carpet as though they were landmines. Nico watched closely, the tension thickening in the air as the realization struck. Nothing Winter did was as casual as it appeared. "Don't step on the moths," Winter warned, his voice low but firm, cutting through the room's oppressive silence. "Duskmorn isn't just a place. It's alive and it hunts." His sharp eyes flicked to Nico and the Wanderer, both of whom instinctively glanced down at their own footing. Winter's explanation came with the grim weight of experience. He spoke of Duskmorn, the sentient house that lured its victims, severing them from their worlds and isolating them within its ever-changing predatory halls. He described how the house employed its own creations, twisted beings like the Razorkin, to stalk and kill those trapped within. His warning carried an edge of practicality as he gestured toward the glowing, spectral dragon spirit hovering near the Wanderer. "Stay close to me and her glimmer," he said, nodding toward the luminescent dragon, a miniature version of Kyodai. "It's more than just a light. It's her hope, her dreams. In this place, it might be the only thing keeping us from being completely swallowed." The Wanderer's glimmer shimmered, casting faint, dancing patterns of light across the peeling walls, a fragile beacon in the overwhelming darkness of the house. Trusting in Winter's grim expertise and the glimmer's guidance, the group set off, their steps cautious and deliberate. They followed the dragon's glow, hoping it would lead them to safety, or perhaps, against all odds, to their lost companions. Each step was a gamble in a game rigged by Duskmorn itself, but for now, it was all they had. Winter, Nico, and the Wanderer pressed onward, the spectral glow of Kyodai's miniature form illuminating the shadow-choked corridors of the house. The labyrinth seemed endless, its ever-shifting walls and treacherous paths twisting as if alive, intent on breaking their resolve. Their goal was clear, yet perilous. Find Nashi, the adopted son of Planeswalker Tamio, and bring him to safety. The journey was far from simple. The house threw countless horrors their way, foul, slithering creatures prowling the darkness, and glitching ghosts that slipped unnervingly from mirrors, their fractured forms flickering like corrupted memories. In one room, they faced shifting illusions that disoriented and separated them, monstrous figures emerging from nowhere to capitalize on their confusion. Winter's calculated cunning and the Wanderer's steady leadership helped them stay together, though each close call left them more frayed than before. Eventually, the group stumbled into a clearing unlike the oppressive halls they had been navigating. Here, under a pale, unearthly light, they found 4 captive Nezumi, including Nashi, bound and guarded by towering, spindly creatures known as wickerfolk. Their forms, woven from gnarled wood and shadows, radiated an aura of menace. The rescue was swift, but fraught with danger. The Wanderer and Nico worked in unison, exploiting the wickerfolk's aversion to fire. Nico conjured radiant bursts of light that mimicked flames, while the Wanderer wielded her Fate Spinner, a weapon of great precision but finite use. Winter provided cover, his slingshot sending debris flying with pinpoint accuracy to draw the creature's attention. The plan worked, barely. The wickerfolk recoiled from the fiery illusions, and the group seized the opportunity to free the Nezumi. Nashi, though shaken, was resolute in his gratitude. But victory came at a cost. The Wanderer's Fate Spinner discharged its final thread, leaving her without one of her most reliable tools. As they regrouped, the grim reality of their situation loomed over them. The house was still as dangerous and unknowable as ever, its shifting rules mocking their small triumphs. And Nashi, though rescued, was far from at peace. His obsession with finding Tamio burned brightly, driving him, and by extension the group, deeper into the house's endless labyrinth. For now, they had survived. But in Duskmorn, survival was just the beginning of the nightmare. The journey through Duskmorn's unnatural expanse took an unexpected turn as the party, now led by the resolute Nashi, ventured into environments that defied the logic of the house. Their path led them into the Valley of Serenity, a misnomer as its tranquil beauty concealed a chilling menace. Nestled within the valley was the stronghold of the cult of Valgavoth, a sinister congregation devoted to the demon whose name had become synonymous with survival at any cost. As they pressed on, the group found themselves in the cult's altar room, a dark, oppressive chamber where the air seemed to hum with malice. There, the cultists were in the midst of a grim ritual. 3 captives lay before them. A wounded girl named Rill, her face pale but defiant, a silent but uninjured captive named Sunset, and another whose fate was already sealed. The cultists surrounded their altar, chanting in a language that crawled under the skin. Rill, her will faltering under the weight of pain and fear, surrendered to the cult's demands. She accepted their offer, vowing to join their ranks in exchange for the chance to survive. The group watched helplessly as she stepped toward the altar, her transformation into one of Valgavoth's acolytes, beginning with a solemn ritual. Nico, the Wanderer, and Nashi attempted to intervene, their combined efforts nearly breaking the cult's resolve. But their plans unraveled in an instant when Winter, the one they had reluctantly come to trust, betrayed them. With a cold detachment, he sealed the room's heavy doors behind them, leaving the group trapped inside with the fanatical cultists. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. Winter's calculating eyes offered no explanation as the lock clicked shut, leaving the 3 to face the cult alone. The once fragile threads of camaraderie dissolved into bitter realization. In Duskmorn, trust was just another gamble, and Winter had chosen his side. Now prisoners of the cult of Valgavoth, Nico, the Wanderer, and Nashi stood surrounded by zealots, the weight of betrayal and the house's oppressive malice pressing down on them. What awaited them was uncertain, but one truth remained. Duskmorn had no mercy, and its horrors were far from over. Winter stood before the glowing doorway, its edges flickering with an unnatural light that promised freedom, a gateway to Innistrad. The house's suffocating grip seemed to loosen for the first time in years, and the air around him felt charged with the culmination of his dark bargain. The sacrifices were complete, the final piece of his pact with Valgavoth fulfilled. For a fleeting moment, Winter allowed himself the luxury of belief that this time, survival meant escape. But just as he stepped toward the door, the sharp gleam of a shard flickered in the corner of his eye. Nico, quick and resolute, struck. The shard of magic expanded, encasing Winter in a crystalline prison before he could cross the threshold. Trapped and immobile, Winter's sharp eyes burned with fury and betrayal as Nico and the others slipped past, escaping Duskmorn through the very doorway he had fought to open. As the house fell silent once more, Valgavoth appeared, its monstrous form emerging from the shadows like an all-encompassing nightmare. The demon regarded Winter's crystalline form with a predatory satisfaction, a twisted grin spreading across its otherworldly visage. With a flick of its clawed hand, the shard shattered, freeing Winter, only for him to immediately realize his fatal miscalculation. Valgavoth's promises were never made without a cost, and now, with his usefulness spent, Winter was no longer exempt from its hunger. The demon's maw opened wide, and with a guttural roar, it consumed him, dragging him into the void. Whether Winter's existence ended in that moment, or if some cruel fragment of his being lingered within Valgavoth's grasp, remained a mystery. All that was certain was that Duskmorn and the demon that thrived within its shifting walls had claimed yet another soul. And the doorway to freedom, now sealed, faded back into the darkness. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Winter's dark journey through Duskmourn and the high-stakes choices that defined his fate. If you like the story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering lore and tales from the multiverse. And if you have any thoughts or theories about Winter's fate, or the twisted world of Duskmourn, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of the plains.